Welcome to the Bilingual Montessori webinar series. Hello, I'm Amy with Bilingual Montessori. We're here to support you in building stronger bilingual programs. This series has been made possible through Erasmus Plus funding by the European Union. In this webinar, we are going to follow the journey of one school leader on her pathway of implementing a bilingual Montessori program over 10 years. You will learn about the challenges she faced with the difficult realities, the compromises that were sometimes made, the important values she thoughtfully set as the foundation, and the beautiful unfolding process that led to the well-established school she operates today. She will show you some supportive organizational tools that are included in our design process field guide to help you on your own journey. Now I have the pleasure to introduce to you Lucy Welsted, the owner and director of Montessori Cordoba International School and the Education for Life group. Lucy grew up in Yorkshire in England in a very monolingual environment. She learned Spanish through immersion over the 20 years that she has resided in Cordoba. She knows firsthand how it feels to adjust and acquire a new language. She has worked in different local educational institutions as a qualified international elementary school teacher and is AMI trained in elementary and adolescent levels. Lucy has gone through leadership training with the Whole School Leadership Institute and is a representative of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges for their international school accreditation visits. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you for that introduction, Amy. I won't say anything else about my work because the topic of this webinar is my school story. So we're going to find out quite a bit about the path I've been on for the last 10 years. I'm going to share my presentation now. So Bilingual Montessori, the group that I'm also involved in, will propose that I record a webinar about my school journey and what steps I've taken in developing a bilingual Montessori program. Now, when I was faced with this topic, I did think to myself, that's 10 years work. How am I going to do a half an hour talk on that? So I'm going to try and get to some of the most interesting parts, or sort of, if you're really new to this idea, things that you could keep in mind that might help you avoid some of the pitfalls or solve some of those puzzles that come up along the way. So first of all, really, it's worth saying that our Montessori program in particular was designed to be a bilingual program right from the start. I actually had interests in Montessori, or respectful education for children, and a lot of interest in the process of learning additional languages as well. I'd worked in that field before. I'd also studied bilingual education, and I'd learned a language myself as an adult. And I was bringing up my children in a bilingual household. So the idea of a bilingual program to me was just something that was natural. I really, from my experience as a language teacher and as a primary school teacher, I had some ideas already formed about what would be the best way to share the gift of being bilingual with children, whilst at the same time respecting their own culture and their own first language. Now, we started off with a few initial premises, things that we knew we wanted to do. Well, the we's really me because it was just me at the beginning and my husband listening to all my ideas. So this was how it started. I knew that I wanted to create a strong and authentic Montessori program. Um, I didn't yet know the difficulties that would come up in marrying the two ideas of how to create a strong, authentic Montessori program in a bilingual environment uh, way back 10 years ago. I think my thinking was, well, we'll just deliver the classes in English and it'll be an immersion environment and the children will learn, but they'll also be free because it's a Montessori classroom. And well, a lot of things come up along the way that mean that you have to take decisions. Yes, just to repeat, the idea of respecting children's culture was important to me. I know there's a lot of schools around that kind of live in sort of a foreign school bubble. And I definitely felt that it was important for children to feel that their own language and culture were of equal value in our case, an English speaking school, as English. Um, so I was quite sure that I wouldn't be doing anything like um, prohibiting the use of first language between the children in the classroom or in the garden, for example. It seemed clear to me as well from my own children's experience and the experiences I'd had in work that a great time to learn a first language is in the early years. When I refer to early years, I mean from 0 to 6. So I was quite clear that that would be a time for an immersion program. By immersion, I mean that the children's day to day occurs in English, or the adults that accompany the children speak in English all the time, given some exceptions. And it was also very important to me that the children's learning was relevant and meaningful, which is connected to the idea of respecting children's culture and first language. But it also means that I definitely wanted language learning to be to be something useful for the children, not something that they would do in isolation, just because adults say it's a good idea to learn English, which is something I think I'd come across in my time as an English language teacher when I was younger. And I worked with young children in English language academies. And sometimes I got the feeling that they just didn't know why they had to do this. So that obviously affected their motivation. So I really wanted to find a way to get over that hurdle as well in language learning. So I knew I wanted to create a strong, authentic Montessori program from nothing. So it definitely wasn't a small task, and my own resources were fairly limited. But luckily, my partner, my husband, decided that we'd use what little money we had to invest in me starting a little school, a little nursery school, and we rented a place in town that was sort of the ground floor of some flats, and it had a little garden area outside, which was quite unusual for this type of building in Cordoba. So I was very pleased when we got that place. And I started thinking about how I could make this Montessori program happen. Uh, we needed the environment. As I said, we found that lovely space. Um, Materials, I remember at first, everything seemed so expensive. And it really felt like it was all coming out of, my family income pocket. So it was definitely tough and quite scary at the start. Um, One of the most important things you need are guides and assistants to help you. Um, and I'll go into that a little bit more on one of the following slides. Um, and of course, you need children. You need parents to trust your new program with their most beloved, their children. I've chosen some of these photos, and I had a great time going back through the files, looking at these old photos to put in this presentation. I included this one here, which is me reading a story to a group of children I managed to convince to come in off the street. This was when we first opened, or we first. I don't think we'd even opened. I think we'd rented the place, but we hadn't officially opened. And I was just trying to stir up interest in the local community. So I'd put some signs outside saying, "Come in and I'll read a story to your kids." And so it was interesting seeing that old photo. We didn't have anything, just a chair. Um, I saw these lovely photos of some of our first children in our infant community. We started with an infant community because it's easier in Spain. I know that's not the normal way to do things in Montessori. Normally, you start with Children's House, but in Spain, it's just easier to operate as an infant community in terms of licensing and regulations. So that's why I started with the infant community level. And I also had my own children. My youngest daughter was that age, so I really wanted her to attend. And here are some of the first children. Take a look at this little girl called Carolina. She's coming up again later. That's what I'm saying. Remember her face. And here's Lolo. He's still with us as well. These children are now 10. This is one of our first infant community photos. And our wonderful guide Denise, who's still with us, but now in Children's House. Our assistant. Yeah, it was really nice seeing these photos. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the human resources puzzle. Now, there is actually a community conversation available that I did about this topic. It's available on the Bilingual Montessori website video library. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we have a whole talk about that. But I did just want to mention a few points because in general, the feedback that I get from new bilingual Montessori programs, well, probably all Montessori programs, but especially bilingual Montessori programs, is that they really struggle to find the right staff, the adults, to accompany the children. That's because they want Montessori guides, brilliant if they're AMI trained Montessori guides, uh, really fluent English speakers, and that's not always easy to find. Depending on where you live, I guess maybe in some international places there are more people with that profile available, but definitely where we are in Cordoba, it wasn't something that you had around. And there weren't really any other Montessori schools around either. So that was another thing. I really had to, at the start, I really enticed the families into the school with the English, because although there were families in Cordoba that were definitely looking for an alternative educational option for their children, I think that there were a lot more families that didn't yet know that what they were looking for was Montessori. So the English component, the English speaking component, so many families are interested in their children speaking English, was important. And as I think I talk about it on the community conversation, we decided to use the space that we were renting as a language school in the afternoons for older children. So that's why I've got this photo on here. And here you can see, well, one of the teachers obviously celebrating Pancake Day with the children who are definitely not in our infant community. So this is what I mean when I talk about maybe being creative to cover your HR needs. We had a full day and a half day infant community program, and for the half day program, it's just was pretty impossible to find a Montessori guide in Cordoba, English speaking, that only wanted to work half time. If people are moving from a different country or a different city to come and work in your program, they normally need a full-time salary. So having the English language classes in the afternoon really helped me, because I could have staff work half time in the nursery, half time and that enabled them to earn a full-time salary. And making compromises is important. You might not find the ideal profile that you're looking for. So think about prioritizing the qualities and qualifications. Maybe you won't find somebody with an AMI diploma, but maybe they'll have some other kind of diploma. But if you feel after the interview process that their personality fits, then it's probably worth going for that. Play to the strength of the program. Thinking right back to when I started and how I managed to convince people to come and work for a new program. I guess I tried to definitely convey our serious intention as a young Montessori school, and also to convey that I would support them with moving to a different place. Some people don't speak Spanish when they move. That was the same as me when I moved here when I was 25. So, I also told them that I'd been through that, and I knew the ups and downs and what kind of support they needed, and that I'd be there to help them make doctor's appointments or anything like that. So that can really help, because it's true that if you are a Montessori guide, especially an English speaking one, you probably have lots of opportunities around the world. So the truth is that most people prefer an established program, because they tend to run more smoothly. They tend to be clear about their own identity, and experienced guides know this. So they will often avoid new programs. So as a new program, you need to really think about what you can offer, and make sure that you get that across during the hiring phase. I've been lucky. We've had staff working for us for a long time, or I've been lucky, or we've just managed to build a good team, and I think we've all been involved in making the progress we've made together. Right, we're going to look a bit more in depth about this idea of respecting children's culture and first language. So one thing a new program has to do Oh, we expanded. I will tell you a bit more about how our program expanded. When we'd had our infant community for a year or so, and the parents were very happy, and I spent time telling them about Montessori. I arranged parent education evenings so that they could learn a bit more about it, and that definitely piqued their interest, and they were interested in their children continuing into Children's House. So I remember them saying, "When are you going to open Children's House? Why can't you open Children's House?" And I had to say, I can't afford it. I've put all my money into this place. So that's when the idea emerged of the parents maybe helping out financially to find a space to open a children's house. Again, um, it was clear to us that Children's House should also be an immersion program to really take advantage of that stage. But strangely enough, we also decided to open elementary at the same time. This is because of I think it's a particularity in Spain, which is that when parents choose a school for their children, they choose a school for their children at 3 years old, and they expect them to stay there. And so if you open a 3 to 6 program, it's possible that parents say, well, I won't be able to get into another school when they're 6 because all the better schools will be full. So I knew that we needed to open both programs. I also had an ulterior motive, which was that one of my children was at that age and starting elementary. So I wanted to open that program for her. So again, going against the sort of normal path of growth of a Montessori school, we opened Children's House and Elementary at the same time, and we needed somewhere to do that. So we found a lovely place. We looked for somewhere to rent first, but couldn't find anywhere. So we ended up in the end looking for more investment, getting a mortgage, and buying somewhere. And that's where we are now. We opened our children's house and elementary program in sort of 3 or 4 years after starting our infant community. And yes, we wanted to, it was a time to think really about how we could prepare a school culture that was bilingual, especially because in elementary, now by law, as an international school, we needed to include the teaching of certain areas in Spanish. And it seemed logical anyway. The areas are Spanish language, Spanish history, Spanish geography. So definitely made sense for us to do it that way. So for the elementary program, I needed to think about how this was going to be a bilingual program now, moving over from our immersion programs in infant community and children's house. To create this culture, because we decided that children were going to speak in their first language, which in the great majority of children here is Spanish, we needed to create an environment where there were lots of opportunities for spontaneous interaction in English. So you kind of need to engineer those situations because it's understandable that naturally when children are together and their mother tongue is Spanish, they will speak in Spanish to each other. I think as a Montessori program, it's inevitable that we think a lot about children's well-being or healthy, natural development. So we knew that the children needed to be able to express themselves in any language they could use. Because they need to develop fully. It's not just about them developing their second language. And I'd seen examples in previous places that I'd worked when children were highly discouraged to speak their native language, that some children just practically stopped communicating at all. And I think developing communication in any language is very important. So what we needed to do was think of a way we could engineer the environment to create reason to use English. Another puzzle was also the fact that children varied so much in their language abilities. And as a new program, it's quite normal that you don't have the luxury of being able to select the children that come into the program. So I think it's quite normal to have older children starting in elementary or even in this kind of last year of children's house who haven't had previous exposure to the second language that you're working in. Or Montessori. So that's a whole different webinar. And after sort of struggling with this over some time and, lots of meetings with the teachers, the guides and assistants about how we could overcome this puzzle, we came up with the idea of creating individual language plans, which would help us to prepare the children's learning and to understand the language profiles of our group at a deeper level. And also to be sure that everybody's expectations were in line, because I think that one thing that happens often in bilingual programs is that there can be quite a lot of confusion about what the expectations are, or what the language objectives are, what the vision is. And this happens with staff and with families. So when we came up with the idea for the language profile and plan, that seemed to help everybody understand how we were going to work together. So here's a little video which shows our format, which I just thought about what information I thought everybody needed to know and what we needed to work with, and designed this form. So let's have a look at that together. Here is our profile and plan. We just have some basic information about the children's language background from home, the experience, the linguistic experience in school settings, their academic background, where they come from, their level of English and Spanish, and any modifications we want to make for them when we're delivering presentations, lessons, or what the expectations are. Then we include a section about what the families are expecting this child to be able to achieve in the future, including what target we want them to have at the end of the level. And then this is something a bit more technical, where we evaluate what level they're at each year. We do a review mid-year and try and see if we're really keeping up with what we expected. Now these language plans, we only use them for children who fall outside what we call the regular experience of children in our program. So that's children who start when they are older than 4 in the program with no previous experience of either one language or the other language, and children who may have some specific language difficulty. Apart from that, that's when we use these profiles and we share them with the families. Another thing that is very important for your community is for everybody to understand what the language expectations are for the adults and the children in the environment, and what the objectives are. This is our current language policy. We're going to have a little look at it again in the video. And in this policy, you really need to be able to share with everybody in the school, the staff and the families, what your vision is, because I think that one common pitfall is people not being aligned in the vision of why we're delivering a bilingual program, how we're delivering a bilingual program, what expectations are for the children. And because it's actually quite complex to find a way of delivering authentic Montessori in a second language environment, it's important for the guides and assistants to feel clear about how they can work with the children and what's expected of their work with the children. And they're going to need support and ideas and help, not necessarily from administration, but from outside sources, from each other, and time to share their ideas and their good practice. But having a policy helps everybody to literally be on the same page. Let's have a look at the policy here. We're not going to read through it all, but I just want to show you the different parts of the policy. So we talk about how we use language around school, what the expectations are when we communicate with families. We talk about how we use our record keeping tool. In our case, it's Transparent Classroom. What the language objectives are for the different levels we have, infant, community, children's house. We also include exceptions to these rules, as there will always be exceptions. In our case, for example, we recognize, as we prioritize well-being, that it's often better to speak with children in their first language, especially when they're adapting to a new environment or when they're new to the school, that sometimes really having a clear understanding of what's being said is the most important thing in an interaction. So, for example, if we're dealing with conflict resolution or something that has really upset a child, then we don't want to create that extra barrier to being able to connect and calm down and think about solutions. So that's the kind of exception we have in our policy, but it does really help everybody if you share that as an official exception, you know? So we talk about an overview of the different areas: writing, reading, listening, and the additional areas for literacy development. It's an overview. This is not the curriculum, it's just a policy. The assessment guidelines for different areas and different levels. And then we talk specifically about the Spanish work that children do in the elementary program. So this is a quick, easy to read document. that anybody should be able to read in the community. I think it's also very helpful to understand, as I think I always did, that language, developing a bilingual program is quite a long path, because learning a language takes a long time. So, excuse me, you can't. Sorry. Learning a language takes a long time. So you can't expect to open a bilingual program and have a bilingual program in 1 or 2 years' time, especially when you're from a very monolingual community, as is our case here in Cordoba in Spain. So people need to understand that it's a process. Actually, now in our program, as I said, I remember I showed you the photo of the little girl who's now 10. So she's been with us for 10 years. She's one of our upper elementary students. And it's now when we have the majority of students having been in our program for such a long time that we find ourselves having to make less and less individual adjustments for language level. So, it's important to share that with the staff and the other members of your community, that it's to be expected that this will be a long-term implementation. That also makes it extra special when you eventually get there. So I wanted to go into a bit more detail now about why we decided to implement an immersion program in the early years, which I mentioned was the 0 to 6. I know that a lot of bilingual Montessori programs don't do this, and it can work very well as well in different ways. I think it depends very much on the school context. So in our case, as I said before, Cordoba is very much a monolingual environment. Most children on our program, the only exposure they have to English is at school. So we really needed to maximize, if we want them to be able to get to a level where they can use English for academic study when they're 12, we really needed to take advantage of the first plane of development, for them to learn as much English as possible. So an immersion environment for us just makes language learning very natural as well. If the adults in the environment are using that language to communicate with the children have a real, genuine reason for trying to express themselves in that language. In some cases, or when guides or assistants first arrived, they really don't understand Spanish. So children naturally have to make that effort. And that actually also happens when we get a student in in one of our environments who's come from a different country and doesn't understand Spanish. That's when you see, oh, suddenly the children are using a lot more English between themselves. So that can also be very positive for encouraging the production of English. I think when children have been through an immersion program from 1 or 2 years old, their listening skills are great. They normally understand everything that's going on in the classroom very quickly. But what tends to be more difficult is getting the children to get used to producing English as well. Because obviously, as I said before, we do allow them to express themselves in Spanish. We felt that was important. So that comes back to what I mentioned earlier about kind of trying to engineer situations where children have to use English. Um, the guides don't generally pretend that they don't understand Spanish, but they do maybe try and set a tone. So one tip, for example, is if you're doing circle time or sitting around with the children, like here we can see one of the guides sitting with the children to talk about some planting, I think. Then obviously she will always be speaking in English, but if she wants the children to join in the conversation in English, then one good tip is to choose a child that you know is going to answer in English first. You know, then you don't have to be explicit about it, but then the other children automatically just go into, oh, this is an English conversation mode. And it also involves maybe thinking about extra games or materials on the shelves that children can use together to have conversations in English. Just to go a little bit more into detail about how to ensure that learning is relevant and meaningful. I think having the second language as a language that's used around the school is really important. And if you have a program or a situation where that's not happening so much, then maybe you have to try and make some changes and decide together as a team. I don't know, look, when we're around the school, we're going to try and the adults and speak to each other in English as well. Um, or try and think of any opportunity really for the children, whether it's having maybe pen pals from another English speaking country or not an English speaking country, but the common language is English, and doing different projects where they're using the language to communicate something that they really need or want, which is where this little video I've got comes in. This is the recent thing we're doing. This came from one of our elementary groups who wanted more reading books. So they themselves decided that they wanted to create this little video to try and launch a book drive. So I'm going to play this little video. It's really sweet, and it shows the children using English for a project that they've designed that they want to do. And I just wanted to let you know that this girl on the right is the little Carolina from one of the first slides. So let's see how she's grown.
Oh, hello, amazing parents. We have a special message for you today. We are on a mission to make our school library even more fantastic. We need your help. It's time for a magical book drive. Imagine all the new adventures and knowledge we can discover together. So please dust off those old books and bring them to school. Let's fill our library with stories and dreams. Thank you for being the best book-loving parents ever. Let's make our school library the most enchanting place on earth.
Oh, isn't that just a lovely little video? So yeah, you know, it's great to see how those children have progressed since they were babies. And also, you know, that's an example of a way that we use language, our English language in different parts of the school and across the curriculum. There's quite a lot of ways that you can be conscious about where you can find opportunities to support children in the development of their second language when you're doing all different types of activities and presentations. This webinar doesn't really give me time to go into that, but I know there's going to be lots of really interesting information about this in the field guide that the Bilingual Montessori group is creating, and also on their online courses that are coming up soon as well. So back to our school story. So I think one of the things that we found puzzling was how to find the right mix of languages in elementary, because this, bear in mind what I said, this was our bilingual environment. Now, at first, we really thought that the most important thing was to have an English-speaking elementary Montessori guide to work with this very small group of children. I think there were only 6 or 7 children in that first year. Because actually, you know, a lot of these children didn't really have much knowledge of, well, it was about 50-50. About half of the children knew English quite well, and the other half didn't. Now, this is where we learned that it was very important not only for guides to be great Montessori guides, but also for them to understand the process of learning a second language, and also that they understand how to adapt their work for second language learners. This was where we developed a profile that we use a lot in our school when we're searching for staff. I think pretty much all our guides have some qualification and experience in teaching English as a second language alongside their Montessori qualifications. And that is definitely very helpful. So it's a good thing to bear in mind. We quickly decided that what we needed in this environment was a Spanish-speaking guide and an English-speaking guide. And that we would divide the areas between these two guides. So if I remember rightly, the English-speaking guide took care of obviously the English language, the maths, art, music, that kind of presentation. And the Spanish-speaking guide did the cultural parts of the curriculum, the history, science, geography, and Spanish language. Now, what we observed here was that the children definitely gravitated towards the person that spoke their mother tongue. So this was over the course of maybe a year or two. We observed that children developed preferences for working in the areas where they were working in their own language, in their native language, and that definitely didn't seem right. You know, it's not right that children decide they don't like maths because maths is in English. So that was a puzzle. We had to sit down and really think about how to solve that one. We decided that as a program that definitely had the objective of most children being able to have a good enough level of English at 12 to be able to continue their studies in English if they and the family wanted to, that in order for the children to connect with all the areas in the classroom with the same amount of passion and motivation, and also to connect with the guides. I mean, you know, the relationship that children have with the guides isn't just about presentations. It's also very important for the children to feel connected to the guides, not just for presentations, but to feel that they trust that adult and can go to them with any difficulty or problem that they might be having. And we definitely didn't want language to be a barrier to this. That's why, as I mentioned before, one of our language use exceptions is moments of conflict or distress. But we were trying to think of a way to not have this kind of, I don't want to say competition, but it was like a pull in the classroom of, you know, the children would always go to the Spanish speaking guide with all their difficulties or their questions, or just to chat with them about their weekend in the patio, you know, that kind of thing, which is all really important in building that relationship. But it wasn't happening so much with the English speaking guides, and it just seemed like, first of all, a shame for the adults involved, but also that it was frustrating because the children weren't really taking advantage of those opportunities to practice their English communication as much as they could. So that's when we took the decision to run the elementary classrooms really almost all in English. Bear in mind that our program had already been running for a few years as well. So we were now enjoying that situation where we have children moving up to our elementary program who have been in our infant community program and children's house, so have a strong base in English. So these factors came together when we decided to move towards this model. And that's when we decided to present all the areas in English, with the exception of just Spanish geography and Spanish history. And what we have now is a system where the assistants in the class are actually Spanish primary school teachers who have an excellent level of English. So they use English in all their day-to-day interactions with the children, but when they do the presentations related to Spanish language, history and geography, that's the only time that language, that Spanish is used in the classroom from the adult in a presentation. And this, you know, pretty much immediately alleviated that situation of the children having preference to from one guide to another, and we moved over to the system of having a guide and an assistant in each classroom. In one classroom, we have co-guides, a Spanish speaker and English speaker, but that's because they like to work that way, and that can work well as well when both parties are happy with that arrangement. Because I do think if someone who prefers a lead guide role is forced into a co-guide role, that can obviously often be difficult to manage. It can work well and you know, be a nice environment, but it's not necessarily helping the adults in those environments to feel that they are really achieving all they want to achieve. So there were our moments of trial and error in elementary. I mean, despite those changes, you know, children were always learning. We were always learning as well. You know, we even got to the point where sort of last year or the year before last year, we had to sit down and say, I'm not sure about this, if the Spanish is, you know, if they're using enough Spanish, are they doing enough Spanish work? So it was interesting to get to that point and tip the scales the other way. And we spent some time focusing on strengthening our Spanish curriculum with them. So I think that every program will kind of find these things along the way. And it's also important to work with what you have. As I mentioned before, we started a policy of what we call training local talent, we called it. But basically, we decided it was easier for us to find mid to long-term staff if there were people who were already based in Cordoba that were maybe English language teachers, but were looking for something more, looking to work in an alternative educational environment, if they felt attracted to the Montessori philosophy, and then we decided that we would talk to them about training them to be Montessori guides, because they already had roots in the city, and that sort of helped avoid people changing and going to live somewhere else just because, it's not what they expected, or they haven't made many friends in the city, or they were just passing through really for a year or two, which is all common with international teaching candidates, I think. So this is our school now. In 2019, we built our new building, and that's when we managed to expand to include multiple classrooms from each level. So we now have 2 children's houses and 3 elementary environments. And we're definitely enjoying being able to do much more varied things with the children now in English, because really the levels are so strong in almost all the cases. Just to encourage you all to stay positive, to always reflect on the progress that you are making, to share with your community that it's not going to happen by magic. It involves a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of effort and a lot of patience. And obviously, if you can get families involved in the process as well, that really, really helps. Definitely for us, families who are on board and try and expose their children to English at home, that really, really helps us to see better results. But, we know that we can work with families as well who, often one of the reasons that they sign up for a bilingual Montessori program is because they feel frustrated about their own efforts at speaking English during their lifetimes, and I really sympathize with that. I don't think I was a natural, and I learned Spanish when I was 25. Between 25 and 30, I'd say, because like I said, it's a long process. It doesn't just happen overnight. So I hope that's been helpful or inspiring. I knew there's so much to say. I tried to not to go into too much detail in any one part and give an overview, and I hope I've managed to do that. And remember, there's a lot more information to be found in all the other community conversations, webinars, the upcoming field guide, and the online courses. And I think that the support you'll be able to get from the Bilingual Montessori project will definitely be invaluable to you if you're trying to set up a new Montessori bilingual program. Thank you.